Are you ready to plant your Amaryllis bulbs, but you're not really sure how to do it?
Well, if so, that's great, because today we're going to show you how to plant your Amaryllis bulbs indoors and outdoors step by step.
Hi, we're Sean and Allison from Spoken Garden, and we're partnering with Eden Brothers to help you in your garden. But before we get to planting Amaryllis, it's really fun to think about. You can plant these both outdoors in your garden or indoors as an indoor plant.
Yeah, and whether planting indoors or outdoors, Amaryllis like to be planted in a full sun to partial shade location, and they like nutrient-rich, well-draining soil. Now, before we show you how to plant these Amaryllis bulbs, there's a couple things we'd like you to know. First, Amaryllis bulbs are native to South Africa, and they're in the Amaryllidaceae family. They're known for their wide, strappy leaves and trumpet-shaped flowers. Amaryllis bulbs are generally hardy in zones 8 through 12, and their flowers can reach up to 8 inches in diameter. Now, Amaryllis are known to have an upright form, and they are considered a true type of bulb, just like alliums, tulips, and daffodils. They grow best in a protected south-facing location near a wall or a building site. They'll flower in late winter or early spring if they're planted out in the fall in your garden. For newer hybrids that are planted in the fall indoors, they will actually start to flower during the holiday season or in early winter. They grow especially well in container gardens or cut flower gardens along with raised beds. The Amaryllis bulbs we'll be planting today are called Exotic Star, and they can grow up to 24 inches tall. Now, Exotic Star is known to have a long-lasting flower, and each bulb will produce 2 to 3 flowers each season. These are really easy to grow and maintain, and they have average water needs, especially when they start growing and flowering. If grown outside, they can be a great pollinator attractor in the early spring for carpenter bees, for mason bees, and for moths and butterflies. Amaryllis in general are great plants to add to your garden because they're actually deer and rabbit resistant, but you'll need to make sure to watch out for different pests including aphids, thrips, slugs, and snails. And lastly, some companion plants that pair really well with Amaryllis are daffodils, tulips, grape hyacinth, and similar plants.
As we've said already, Amaryllis bulbs can be planted both indoors and outdoors. For outdoor planting of your Amaryllis bulbs, plant them in the fall for a late winter to early spring bloom. You can even start them indoors as early as 2 to 4 weeks before your last forecasted spring frost to get an early jump on those flowers. You can plant them in the fall for a late fall to early winter flowering. If you plant them early enough in the fall, you can have them blooming right during holiday season.
When your bulbs first arrive, it's always a good idea to open the box, take them out of their packaging, and inspect them visually and just feel and see if they feel solid or if there's any discoloration on them. Now, for any bulbs, you always want to make sure that you understand where the top and the bottom of your bulb are so you plant them correctly each time. For Amaryllis bulbs, it's really easy to know what part is the top and which is the bottom, where they're really big on the bottom and then they get narrower to the top. But sometimes you'll actually get them shipped to you with their stems starting to grow like you see here. Make sure that growing tip or the narrower part of the bulb is always pointing up and the larger bulbous part is pointing down. Also, these are true bulbs, so they will have a basal plate on the bottom of each bulb where those roots will grow. When planting outdoors, you need to space each bulb 2 inches away from each other, and you need to dig down and loosen up at least 6 inches of soil so there's a lot of fluffy soil for the roots and the bulb to actually grow into. Now, whether planting indoors or outdoors, when you place the bulb in the ground, you'll need to have about 1 to 2 inches of the top of the bulb exposed above the soil level. And like most bulbs, Amaryllis look great when they're planted in odd numbers like 3s, 5s, 7s, 9s, and more. When planting your Amaryllis bulbs in a container, you should always size your container to be 1 to 2 inches wider than your bulb. So as you can see here, our bulb is about 2 inches in diameter, smaller than the container, and this is perfect. Make sure there's soil in the bottom of each container you're planting into so the bulbs have enough soil around them and below them. For each bulb, make sure to spread those roots out. Make sure to center each bulb in the container for proper placement. Then fill in the soil around the bulb, making sure to evenly place that soil in every nook and cranny. Keep filling in the soil until you have 1 inch of the bulb still above the soil level, and then just tamp down the soil to make sure it's nice and anchored in the container. Only water your Amaryllis bulbs after you start seeing them grow. If you don't see any growth, don't water. Now, after planting, maybe 1 to 2 days or even a couple weeks after, make sure to place a 2 to 4 foot stake about 2 inches away from each bulb, even if they're in a container, but definitely outside. And this will help, once the stem starts to grow, stabilize and keep that stem upright so then it won't flop over once the flower really develops and it gets top heavy. If you're growing your Amaryllis bulbs inside in a container, make sure to rotate the container every 1 to 2 days for maximum sun exposure, so then the stem won't start leaning one way or the other. Amaryllis bulbs have average water needs, so whether growing outdoors or inside, you'll need to keep the soil consistently moist. But you don't want to overwater the plants because they are susceptible to root rot, so keep an eye out for that. You can also apply a water-soluble fertilizer every 2 to 4 weeks to keep them nice and healthy. About 6 to 9 weeks after you've planted your amaryllis bulbs indoors, you should start seeing a stem and flower grow. Now, if you're growing your amaryllis bulbs outdoors, a lot of how to grow it indoors applies for the outdoor growing too, especially with staking them. Once you start seeing them come up out of the ground, you can place a stake 1 to 2 inches away from the bulb, and then you'll be able to tie them off and keep them upright for the rest of the growing season. Similar to growing them indoors, you'll need to make sure when growing them outdoors to keep the soil consistently moist. Now, to help with this, you can always mulch around them, and this will also help with keeping the weeds suppressed. Now, after they're done flowering, you don't want to cut everything down to the ground. Go ahead and deadhead the flower stems all the way down, but cut just above where the leaves are still coming out. You want to make sure that they're gathering that light energy for the next growing season. Make sure to look out for leaf burn, mosaic virus, or rot, because these are what can happen if you overwater your plants. If growing your amaryllis bulbs indoors, make sure to keep an eye out for aphids and mealybugs, but if you're growing outdoors, really look out for snails and slugs. Now, if you're growing your amaryllis bulbs outdoors in containers, or you're growing in a zone below zone 8, you'll need to dig up your bulbs and protect them for over the winter because they won't survive otherwise.
If you want to harvest your amaryllis for cut flowers, wait until the first flower starts to barely open, then cut each stem to at least 12 inches or the longest length you can without completely cutting the plant down to the ground. Immediately place each cut stem into a bucket of cool water with flowers staying above the water level. Always harvest flowers during the coolest time of the day, usually just before, at, or right after sunrise. If timed right, an amaryllis cut flower stem can last for 2 weeks or more in a vase.
Now, if you need more bulb or flower planting or growing tips, you can always go to EdenBrothers.com and check out those planting guides.
And we hope this video was really helpful for you in getting your own amaryllis bulbs planted. And from us at Spoken Garden and Eden Brothers, thank you for watching.